Well, now, settle in there, partner, and let me spin you a yarn about the damnedest thing that ever happened out in Dead Man's Gulch. This here's a tale that'll make your hair stand on end like a spooked porcupine, and I swear on my mother's grave and my daddy's old six-shooter, every word of it's as true as the day is long. It was the summer of 1876, hotter than the devil's front porch, when a stranger rode into our little mining town of Copper Creek. Now, we didn't get many strangers in those parts, seeing as how we was pretty much at the ass end of nowhere, pardon my French. But this fella, he was something different altogether. Name was Silas Blackwood, though we'd come to learn that probably weren't his real name at all. He rode in on a black stallion, black as midnight on a moonless night, and he was dressed head to toe in the finest threads you ever did see. Black duster coat, black hat with a silver band, and boots so shiny you could see your reflection in 'em. Now, that should have been our first warning right there, because ain't no honest man riding through desert country with boots that clean. He tied up his horse outside the Red Dog Saloon, and I watched from across the street as he pushed through them bat-wing doors like he owned the place. I was sitting outside the general store, whittling on a piece of pine and minding my own business, but something about that stranger made the hairs on my neck stand up straighter than fence posts. Now our little town had maybe 200 souls on a good day. We had the saloon, the general store where old man Henderson sold everything from flour to coffin nails, a livery stable run by Tobacco Joe, called that on account of he always had a wad of chaw in his cheek big enough to choke a horse, and a sheriff's office where Sheriff Tom Donnelly spent most of his time sleeping off whiskey hangovers. Dead Man's Gulch, that was about 3 miles north of town, up in the Rocky Hills where the old Spanish supposedly buried treasure back in the day. Got its name from the 49ers, who went looking for gold up there and never came back. Some said they got picked off by Apaches, others said they got bit by rattlers. But the old-timers whispered about something else entirely, something that didn't take kindly to folks poking around in them hills. Anyway, this Silas Blackwood character, he moseys into the saloon and orders himself a bottle of the good stuff. Not the rot gut we usually drank, mind you, but genuine Kentucky bourbon. He pays with a gold coin, just flips it to the barkeep like it ain't nothing. Now that got everybody's attention real quick, because gold coins was scarcer than hen's teeth in Copper Creek. Pretty soon he's got half the town gathered round him, and he's spinning this tale about a Spanish treasure up in Dead Man's Gulch. Says he's got himself a map, authentic as they come, passed down from his great-granddaddy, who was a conquistador or some such nonsense. Says there's enough gold and silver up in them hills to make every man in town richer than Croesus himself. Well, you can imagine how that went over. We had miners who'd been scratching in the dirt for years, barely pulling enough copper out to keep beans on the table. Suddenly, here's this fancy Dan talking about Spanish gold just waiting to be picked up. Some of the boys was skeptical, sure, but others had dollar signs dancing in their eyes, bigger than wagon wheels. Old Pete McCarthy, he was the first to sign on. Pete was a good man, hard-working, but he had 7 kids to feed and a wife who was always after him about their circumstances. Then there was the Donovan brothers. Sean and Patrick, tough as nails, them too, fresh off the boat from Ireland and looking to make their fortune. Young Billy Hawkins joined up, too. Couldn't have been more than 19 years old, still had peach fuzz on his face. And then there was Lucky Jack Sullivan, though he weren't so lucky as his name suggested, seeing as how he'd lost 3 fingers in a mining accident the year before. Silas Blackwood, he organized the whole expedition like a military campaign. Said they'd need supplies for a week, rope and pickaxes, firearms for protection against Apaches or claim jumpers. He was real particular about leaving at dawn, said something about the map, requiring them to reach the Gulch at a certain time when the sun hit the rocks just right. I remember clear as day. I tried to warn Pete McCarthy, pulled him aside the night before they was set to leave and told him straight, "Pete, this don't smell right. That fella's slicker than owl shit, and Dead Man's Gulch didn't get its name from being a friendly place for picnics." But Pete, he just laughed and slapped me on the shoulder. "Ah, you old worrywart," he says. "This is my chance to give my family a better life. I'll bring you back a gold coin or two for your trouble." That was the last time I ever spoke to Pete McCarthy. They rode out at first light, 6 men in total counting Blackwood. The whole town turned out to watch them go, and I remember thinking they looked like a funeral procession heading north, toward them hills. The sun was coming up red that morning, red as blood, and there weren't a bird singing nowhere. Even the dogs was acting strange, whining and carrying on. First day went by, then a second, then a third. We figured they was up there digging, maybe striking it rich. Some of the wives started getting nervous by the 4th day, but Sheriff Donnelly told 'em to simmer down. Said mining takes time. By the 6th day, though, even he was starting to look worried. It was on the 7th day that young Billy Hawkins came back. I was the one who saw him first, stumbling down the main street just after sunrise. He was on foot, no horse, covered head to toe in dust and what looked like dried blood. His clothes was torn to ribbons, and his eyes, Lord have mercy, his eyes looked like he'd seen the devil himself doing a jig on the graves of the damned. He collapsed right there in the street, and we all rushed over to him. His lips was cracked and bleeding, and he kept trying to talk, but nothing but croaking sounds would come out. Doc Wheeler came running with his black bag, and we carried Billy into the doctor's office and laid him on the examination table. We gave him water, just sips at first so he wouldn't make himself sick, and Doc Wheeler tended to his wounds. He had cuts and scratches all over, like he'd been running through brambles, and his feet was a bloody mess from walking miles without his boots. But the strangest thing was his expression. Even after he'd had water and we'd cleaned him up some, he just kept staring at nothing, his whole body trembling like an aspen leaf in a windstorm. It took near about 4 hours before he could string words together, and when he finally started talking, we wished he hadn't. According to Billy, everything had gone fine for the first 2 days. They'd ridden up into Dead Man's Gulch following Blackwood's map, and sure enough they found what looked like an old Spanish mine shaft, all but hidden by rockfall and creosote bushes. The entrance had markings on it, symbols that Blackwood said was Spanish, though none of the other boys could read 'em. They'd set up camp nearby and started excavating the entrance, moving rocks and debris. By the evening of the 2nd day, they'd cleared enough space for a man to squeeze through into the shaft. Blackwood insisted they wait until morning to go inside, said they needed proper light and fresh minds for what lay ahead. That night, Billy said, things started getting strange. They'd built a fire and was sitting around it, and Lucky Jack swore he heard singing coming from the mine shaft. Not any kind of singing he'd ever heard before, he said, but something old and foreign and sad. The others laughed it off, said he was hearing things, or maybe it was just the wind whistling through the rocks. But then Pete McCarthy heard it too, and then the Donovan brothers. Soon enough, all of them except Blackwood was hearing this singing, this mournful wailing that seemed to come from deep inside the earth itself. Blackwood, he just smiled and told them it was a good sign, Said the Spanish miners used to sing in the shafts and maybe their ghost was welcoming them. That should have been enough to make any sensible man pack up and ride home, but gold fever is stronger than common sense, and come morning they were all ready to head into that mine shaft. Blackwood went first, carrying a lantern, and the others followed single file. Billy said the shaft went down at a steep angle, and they had to half climb, half slide through narrow passages. The air got colder as they went deeper, which didn't make no sense, seeing as how it was summer and hot as blazes outside. And there was a smell, Billy said, like copper and something sweet and rotten all at once. They went down maybe 100 feet before the shaft opened up into a cavern, and there, in the light of their lanterns, they saw it. Not just a little bit neither, but more gold than any of them had ever seen in their lives. Gold nuggets the size of your fist, veins of gold running through the rock walls, and stacks upon stacks of what looked like Spanish gold bars, all marked with crosses and crowned shields. Billy said it was like something out of a fever dream. The men went crazy, whooping and hollering, filling their packs with gold, their pockets, even their shirts. Lucky Jack was crying, the Donovan brothers was hugging each other, and Pete McCarthy kept saying, "Thank you, Jesus," over and over like a prayer. But Blackwood, Billy said, he didn't touch none of the gold. He just stood there in the center of the cavern with that smile on his face, watching them. And then he started talking in a language Billy didn't recognize, old words that echoed off the cavern walls and seemed to get louder instead of fading away. That's when the temperature dropped something fierce. Billy said it went from cold to freezing in a matter of seconds, and their breath started coming out in clouds. The lanterns started flickering, and in that stuttering light they saw the walls starting to move. At first, they thought it was just shadows playing tricks, but then they realized the walls themselves was moving, rippling like water, and things was coming out of them. Not men. Billy was real clear about that, but not animals neither. Shapes, he called them, dark shapes that moved wrong, that bent and twisted in ways that hurt to look at. The singing started up again, but louder now, so loud it felt like it was coming from inside their own heads. And the shapes, they started reaching for the men with long, thin arms that seemed to stretch on forever. Lucky Jack was the first to die. Billy said he saw one of them shapes grab Lucky by the throat, and Lucky started screaming, but no sound came out. His body just went rigid, and then he started aging right before their eyes. His hair turned white, his skin got all wrinkled and saggy, and within the space of maybe 10 seconds he looked like he was 100 years old. Then he just crumbled into dust, his clothes falling empty to the cavern floor. Well, that broke the spell right quick. The men started running, dropping their gold, scrambling back toward the shaft opening. But them shapes was faster than any living thing had a right to be. Billy saw one of the Donovan brothers get pulled into the wall itself, saw the rock close over him like water. His brother Sean tried to pull him back out, but all he got was his brother's hand, torn clean off at the wrist. Billy ran like the devil himself was on his heels, and maybe he was. He heard the other men screaming behind him, heard Blackwood laughing, actually laughing as the slaughter went on. Billy scrambled up that shaft, cutting himself on the rocks, not caring, just needing to get out, get away from whatever hell they'd stumbled into. He made it to the entrance and kept running, didn't stop to look back, didn't stop to get his horse, just ran down that mountain like his britches was on fire. He ran all through the night and most of the next day, and the whole time he could hear that singing following him, getting quieter the farther he got, but never quite going away entirely. When Billy finished his story, the room was silent as a tomb. Doc Wheeler looked like he might be sick, and Sheriff Donnelly's face had gone pale as milk. Some of the men wanted to call Billy a liar, said he'd gone sun crazy or was spinning tales for attention. But you could see in his eyes he wasn't lying. Whatever he'd seen up in Dead Man's Gulch had shaken him down to his very soul. Sheriff Donnelly organized a posse the next day, despite his better judgment, took 12 armed men up to the Gulch to search for the others and this Silas Blackwood character. I went along carrying my old Springfield rifle and praying we wouldn't find nothing. We found the camp easily enough. The fire was still smoldering, their supplies was scattered about, and 5 horses was standing nearby, looking spooked but unharmed. But of the men themselves, there weren't no sign. We found the mine entrance, just like Billy had described, and Sheriff Donnelly called for volunteers to go inside. Now, I ain't no coward, but I'd be a damn fool to go into that hole after hearing Billy's story. Turned out I weren't the only one feeling that way. In the end, only 3 men agreed to go down: the sheriff, a hard case named Brickton, and a Mexican fella named Carlos, who claimed he knew about such things and had a crucifix blessed by a priest down in Juarez. They tied a rope around their waists so we could pull them back up if needed, lit their lanterns, and headed down into that shaft. The rest of us waited at the entrance, guns ready, nerves stretched tighter than fiddle strings. They weren't gone more than 20 minutes before we heard screaming. Not the screaming of men in pain, mind you, but the kind of screaming that comes from pure, mindless terror. We started hauling on that rope like our lives depended on it, and Carlos came flying out of that hole, his eyes wide and his face whiter than snow. The rope went slack. We pulled up more, and Brickton's body came tumbling out. He was dead. Stone dead, and his face was frozen in an expression of such horror that several of the men turned away. But the strange thing was there weren't a mark on him, no wounds, no blood, nothing. He died of fright, plain and simple, scared literally to death. We kept pulling, but the rope had been cut clean through. Sheriff Tom Donnelly was still down there somewhere, and by the weight of the rope, we knew he weren't coming back up. Carlos, once he could speak again, told us he'd seen the cavern Billy described, seen the gold still laying there, but he'd also seen other things. Bones, he said, hundreds of human bones scattered across the cavern floor, some of them looking centuries old. And carved into the walls was symbols and writing, warning folks away, cursing anyone who took the gold. He said in Spanish it told of a pact made long ago between the conquistadors and something that lived in the mountain, something old and hungry. The Spanish had tried to cheat this thing, tried to seal it away with its gold, but it had cursed them for their treachery. Anyone who took the gold would feed the thing, would become part of it, trapped in the mountain forever. And Blackwood? Carlos said he saw him down there, or what was left of him. He was part of the walls now, his body stretched and twisted into the rock itself, his mouth open in a silent scream. But his eyes was still alive, still moving, watching them. And there was dozens more just like him, maybe hundreds, all the men who'd ever gone looking for that cursed gold going back centuries. Well, we sealed up that mine shaft tight as we could, used dynamite to bring down half the mountainside on top of it. The whole time we was working, you could hear that singing coming from inside, getting louder and more angry sounding. When the charges went off and the mountain came down, the singing stopped all at once. And the silence that followed was almost worse. We rode back to town and told the folks what had happened. Some believed us, some didn't. The wives of the dead men grieved something fierce, and we had a memorial service for 5 good men who died chasing a cursed fortune. Young Billy Hawkins left town the next week, said he couldn't stand to be anywhere near them hills. Last I heard, he'd gone back east and took up preaching, warning folks about the dangers of greed. The strange thing is, about a month after all this happened, we got ourselves a new preacher in town. Nice fella dressed in black, had a real way with words. He held a revival meeting and got half the town to attend. It wasn't until he started preaching about the sin of greed and the treasures that wait for the faithful that I got a good look at his face. I swear on everything I hold holy, it was Silas Blackwood. Same face, same smile, same cold eyes. But when I tried to tell folks, they thought I'd gone crazy. Said the preacher's name was Reverend Stone, and he'd come from back east with proper credentials and everything. I left town that very night, packed up what little I owned, and rode south. Never looked back. That was near 50 years ago now, and I'm an old man telling stories that nobody believes. But I still have nightmares about Dead Man's Gulch. Still wake up sometimes hearing that singing, and you know what the worst part is? Every now and then I hear tell of another group of prospectors heading up into them hills, talking about Spanish gold and lost treasure. The mine shaft might be sealed, but that thing down there, whatever it is, it's still calling to folks, still hungry, still waiting. So if you ever find yourself riding through Arizona territory and someone offers you a map to easy riches in a place called Dead Man's Gulch, you remember old Sam Peterson's story. You remember Pete McCarthy and his 7 kids who never saw their daddy again. You remember Lucky Jack and the Donovan brothers and Sheriff Tom Donnelly. You remember that some treasures ain't meant to be found and some doors ain't meant to be opened. Because there's things in this world older than us, meaner than us, and a hell of a lot more patient than us. And they're always waiting in the dark places, in the deep places, waiting for fools greedy enough or stupid enough to come looking. That's my tale, partner. I've carried it for half a century now, and I'll carry it to my grave, but I'm passing it on to you now, so maybe you can pass it on to someone else. Maybe if enough folks know about Dead Man's Gulch, maybe if the warning gets spread far enough, fewer men will die chasing that cursed gold. Or maybe not. Maybe greed is stronger than wisdom, and there'll always be another Silas Blackwood, another group of desperate men willing to risk everything for a shot at fortune. Either way, I've said my piece. The sun's going down now, and I need to be heading inside. Don't much care for the dark anymore, not since Dead Man's Gulch. Don't much care for singing neither, especially the kind that comes from places it shouldn't. You take care now, you hear? And if you ever meet a stranger in black riding a black horse and talking about easy money, you run the other way. You run fast and you run far, and you don't ever look back. Because some debts can't be paid, some prices are too high, and some places ought to stay buried, along with their secrets and their gold and their hungry, patient evil. That's the legend of Dead Man's Gulch, partner. May God have mercy on the souls of those who forgot it.